Present.
Dries.
Here.
Benson.
Present.
Knowles. Present. We have an agenda in front of us that, anybody have any questions or
Actually,
comments?
I do, for the public comment, it says any matter under the purview of the Board of Trustees.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe should be Compensation Commission. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for drawing that to our attention.
Otherwise, I move we accept the agenda.
Okay,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone against? Okay, we're good. Moving forward in terms of the approval of the minutes from December 17th. Don't know if everyone's got a chance to look at those if you have already. And if there's any comments or adjustments that you would like to make.
I don't. Yeah, I think I'm good.
I'll abstain because I was not here.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I'll move that we accept the minutes of the meeting from December 17th, 2021.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, good to go. We've gotten communications to the Compensation Commission regarding 4 different positions and their comments. I'm going to assume, hopefully not mistakenly, that people have looked at those. I think that's more just kind of check the box because the responsibilities of each of these positions, well, I can say this is what I do day to day. There are also defined responsibilities with these roles that we will probably talk about a little bit more later. So if there isn't anyone who wants to talk about these specific things at this moment, I would suggest that we move on to setting our schedule.
Actually, I do have a question, and it kind of relates to the duties. I think that's a statutory duties. And it's just a definition I'm not clear on. It does have as a clerk prepares warrants for township checks. And I actually don't know what is a warrant for a township check?
Oh, but warrant.
I've never been a township clerk, but my understanding is that it's preparing the order to issue the check and the check,
Okay,
which of course can be delegated.
yeah, but it's something between like an invoice and actually preparing the check.
It's
Okay,
the pay this.
okay. Not familiar with the language.
Good question.
So will we be discussing what was submitted at any point?
I think that we can, in my opinion, I think that when we talk about the responsibilities of the job and the execution of the job, that would be a good time to take this individual input into consideration. But otherwise, I think we'll end up doing it twice. Okay, if no one objects, then going to setting the meeting schedule. Now, as we've gotten from Mr. Fink, that we have 45 days to conclude our work here. And so 3 of us were here before in terms of what that process was. I thought that was pretty straightforward. Last time, I think we met like every 2 weeks for like 3 weeks. Or no, was it every week? Because it was the beginning of December.
Yeah, we had a shortened time for.
Yeah, we had a short
I
time.
can tell you, but you met at an accelerated
Yeah,
rate because you were trying to get it done before
the end of the year.
I think it was every Friday.
So we met every Friday over the course of, for the first 3 weeks in December. And then right before the holidays, we had an actual vote. So any thoughts on, would you like to meet every week? Would you like to try every other week? We could meet every week and then, we might be able to get it done quickly versus if we met it every other week and then for whatever reason, there was a conflict that we were having a difficult time coming to conclusion on, then we're kind of putting ourselves under the gun again. But what's everybody's thoughts?
I would suggest 2 weeks to the next meeting, and based on how much we get done at that meeting, we may want to go to every week after that. But
Friday at 2 works for me. I've got a book group that actually reads at 5, so.
I'm hoping we're done by 5, my
Yeah,
dear.
okay, great.
2 weeks from now is fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, so I'm gonna move that we schedule our next meeting for June 16th at 2 o'clock. Same bad time, same bad station. Only us
I'll
older
support
people.
that.
All right, so there's a support with Jim.
I have, and not that you should schedule around me, but I have an in-person hearing at 3:30 at the County Service Center at Washington 23. So I will either need to leave around 3 or we'll have Mariah cover me.
Is it something where, do we have any interest in meeting earlier? Whether it was in the morning, would you be available, or, kind of check the box to, I think this group has some flexibility on time, but I don't want to speak for anyone else.
1 o'clock would work for me too.
Me too.
Earlier is fine.
How about 1 o'clock?
Make that work.
So should I modify that motion, or do we need to do motions, or how do we want to do this?
Well, I would say, okay, fine, but maybe you better make a motion.
I think you can accept a friendly amendment.
Okay, that's what I'll accept the friendly amendment if you will support the friendly amendment, Jim?
Sure.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Okay, so we got that done. So, Mr. Fink?
I will be brief because I know that 3 of you have heard this before, that all of you have looked at the materials. I know that Commissioner Benson was paying attention last time while we were going through this, and you've already mentioned one of my points, which is you have 45 days from today to make your determination, not a recommendation, a determination of salaries, and that's for the 7 elected officials. The statute doesn't say what happens if you don't make your determination within 45 days, but given how easily, in terms of time, the commission did this 2 years ago or at the end of 2021, you shouldn't have any trouble. The other points I want to make for you that are in the written materials I gave you is you're subject to the Open Meetings Act. Your communications are subject to the Freedom of Information Act, except those things that are exempt because of statutory reasons. The only one I could think of off the top of my head that could come up here is attorney-client privilege communication. And if one of you or you as a group ask me for legal advice on something, that's privilege, and my answer to you is privilege. If you ask me for legal advice and include in your email half of Scio Township, that's not privilege, and I'm also not going to answer it in kind. So you're subject to those 2 statutes, and I will remind you that you make a determination of salaries only. If trustees are to get extra per meeting pay, whether it's Board of Trustees meeting or the trustees who serve on different committees, that is outside of your authority. You could make a recommendation, but it is absolutely not binding, and the board could exceed it, ignore it, do whatever they want. So your determination is salary. Again, it applies only to those elected officials, and it does not include fringe benefits. So when you make your determination, you'll say, we determine that the salary for the office of supervisor is, and then you will set that. That takes effect on at the beginning of the next fiscal year, which, Christy, am I right, is April 1st is when the fiscal year starts. that is the overview. And reminder, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, I told the three of you this information. So I think that's enough to get you started for today. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Any legal questions? Nothing about high school or college, please.
Well, thanks, Jim. Well, moving forward on that is a review of the current salary, the statutory duties, and the 2021 recommendations and benefits. So starting with the 2021 resolutions, which we have here in terms of what the determination was for salaries. We have that spelled out for every position. This is, again, 2021, what that moment was at time, and obviously the world has changed a little bit. And that gives you some information in terms of, what the board as a whole was thinking and, various input. I mean, the three of us could, wasn't that long ago, and there wasn't that many things that were off in terms of some of that conversation. But this is what we came up with a year and a half ago. And so if anybody would like to start a conversation on that or a reflection on that, give some insight to what we're here with today.
I'll just kind of start a bit of a conversation in terms of our goal and our focus. I would think we would want to make the various people that we're determining salary. We'd want to make them happy with their salary, right? And at the same time, as a fiduciary of the taxpayers in Scio Township, we would want to make them happy with the least salary possible, or at least that would be the focus, right? And so I don't have any background in public service, so I'm thinking as a business, that's kind of, you want to make your employees happy, make them feel valued and motivated at the same time. You look at the bottom line and all that kind of stuff. I just want to make sure there aren't other, and it's particularly difficult for me because these people have been elected. So it's not like we have any control over their, daily performance or anything else. I just wanted to review that to see if I'm missing anything or if that's pretty much it.
Any comments?
Yeah, I think there's a certain level of effort that should be considered. Yes, they're elected positions. They do have defined statutory duties. If there are any additional assigned duties, we should take those into consideration. It's especially true for trustees that there is somewhat of a thought that they will sit on other committees and commissions. So there's a level of effort involved with it. But we're also determining based on the position, not the person. That's
the compensation principle,
right.
because we're not evaluating the individuals. We will evaluate the individuals next November as voters. So we need to look at what it is, the body of the work, and what that work, that whether it's statutory or, like Kathleen said, added duties, what that brings to the township and to us.
And that part about, first of all, I think you're right. I like to see people be, my own opinion, I liked being fairly compensated. I think people should be fairly compensated, and I think that's hard. I think it's hard to determine that if you have a personal relationship with somebody, for starters. If you're working with them, I've worked with people that they were new and they were getting up to speed and they put in a lot more hours. I worked with people that really knew their job well, could knock it out in like half the time anybody else could do it. I worked with people that were very smart, that would work 12 hours a day and couldn't get it done. You know, it's, so we want to be fair, and to Diane's point, this is to the position, and keeping in mind that, so this goes into effect April 1st of next year, and next year is also an election year. So whatever recommendations we give for these positions, or determinations for these positions, go into effect April 1st, but we do not know who's going to be in these positions come November. Now, Jim Dries, former trustee, was a great trustee. He ran the second time. I'm sure you ran because, first of all, you were interested and you probably thought you had a pretty good shot at winning it. And I voted for Jim. And yeah, I voted for you, Jim. But he didn't get that job. And so as we're making those determinations, again, taking that personal part out of it, because we don't know who's going to be holding this position come November.
So the whole slate gets cycled?
Next year is an election year.
Okay. Just saw that earlier. It just seems really strange, but okay.
So and those are things where, that's kind of my opinion in terms of kind of how I try to think about this. And also too, that our neighbors don't come over and say, my taxes are going up because of you.
Well,
I jokingly say that.
yeah, well, I petition at most board meetings about how money is spent, so it's not just these salaries.
Yeah.
No. We have officers and members of the board are compensated first according to their statutory responsibilities. They get a salary based on those statutory responsibilities. They may get additional compensation for additional duties, but those are assigned by the Board of Trustees, and the compensation for those additional duties are enumerated by the Board of Trustees as well. And we're here to go through and assign a salary for the members of the board and its officers based on the statutory duties.
Is that?
Close to correct?
Correct.
Okay, so any additional duties that the Board of Trustees assigns, they assign separate compensation? Or
Separate from us, yes.
If
okay,
you're going to a meeting for planning commission, let's say.
okay.
I think that
Well, currently, there's no additional.
But let me,
Thank you.
I will not participate in your deliberations, I promise, but just to make sure that you're all clear on this. The supervisor, clerk, and treasurer cannot receive additional pay for additional meetings. So, and any additional duties that are assigned, I think probably when the statute was done, that contemplated, for example, the supervisor is also the township assessor. I have one rural township where the supervisor was the township zoning administrator and was paid hourly separately. The board would say, we're assigning this person to that job, usually a job that somebody has to do, and we're going to pay this for it. So that's outside of this salary. Trustees can receive per meeting pay, and trustees could also, a trustee could conceivably be the zoning administrator and get be compensated for that. That won't happen here.
There may be cases where, such as being like the township's delegate to the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, where SEMCOG pays a per diem and mileage. And in that case, while it might have been interesting for Scio Township to compensate for attending, they're already compensated, and maybe it wouldn't be appropriate to do that for the township. So those are things that really are the purview of the board.
Okay.
So we can consider other responsibilities that a trustee or an officer has beyond their statutory duties.
You can consider anything you like. You could even make it personality driven. It would be a mistake to do that. And I watched you do this last time, and you didn't. You did what has been described by your discussion already, which is determining what the office should be. And I guess the other example is that when previously Spalding Clark was both the manager and the supervisor and had distinct salary as supervisor and salary as manager. Then there was a full-time manager, and then when Bryce Kelly retired, Jack Knowles took on those additional duties and received temporary additional pay. The board of trustees set the supervisor's salary as a full-time salary. This panel, this commission determined the supervisor in your analysis was a part-time position and set that salary, and I think it was $40,000. And there is a full-time manager position again. The manager starts next
Monday.
Met her this Monday or Tuesday. And so you can consider anything you want, but in the end, you make a determination as to the salary, and you're in general, what you're trying to do is both what Mr. Boyd said and say, what do we as a township think our elected officials should be compensated? And you have to consider the workload and the value of the job and all sorts of things that aren't my job to do.
Any other comments or along those lines? Well, then we will move on to salary information. I think this part's pretty straightforward in terms of what our elected officials are making with the supervisor. As Jim said, it's $40,000. Donna, treasurer, her salary is $65,000. The clerk's salary is $84,000 and the trustees are $7,000.
7,500.
$7,500, sorry. $7,500. And so that's, where they are today. As Jim said, we don't have any other input or anything else that they've received. I do think that and this is, we're all influenced by our backgrounds. And I worked with retirement plans for the better part of 25 years. And so when we talked about retirement, I worked with companies and talking about, contributions and what have you, and working with HR people an awful lot in that process of recognize that we're only responsible for the determination of those salaries. However, I think that when you're looking at different positions, I think, certainly in the public sector, so I think that applies in the private as well as in the government end of it in terms of what's that whole package in terms of our employees, full-time salaried people, they get an additional 8%. They got full-time, they pay nothing for their health insurance. And they also, I think recently a contribution started this year in April for health savings account of $1,250 a year. So I just kind of put that out there. As I said, that's influenced from my own background in terms of as I'm looking at salaries are a part of it. What's that whole picture look like? Because I only have input to one part of it, but recognizing those other parts of it for these positions.
Like I had a question. You mentioned that the clerk salary is $84,000.
The recommendation for the last period of time was $75,000. But her salary is $84,000.
Okay. And then what is the statute in terms of that adjustment?
The board gets to determine whether or not they accept it.
Well, there's that, and salary can't be reduced during the term of office.
Okay.
And so if you continued at $75,000 on November 20th of
We didn't change it.
2024, then it would be, if you continue to determine 75,000 and the board did not reject it, then it would continue. Well, actually, even if they rejected it because it's 75 now, except that it can't be reduced this term for Clerk Flintoff, it would go to 75,000.
Okay.
I think that part's probably pretty clear cut. No one has any particular expansion of comments on that. Job descriptions, and I think this is where we have the statute, we could discuss the statutory responsibilities, as well as, you know, we've had some job descriptions submitted by some of our officials. So this would be the time to. One of the things, you know, I'll go first here, is, and I think that this could be hard for us to identify, is that we do have a new, you know, we've gotten some job descriptions from, as I said, four officials. And we also, as we commented earlier, is that we now have a new full-time manager is coming into the picture. And my understanding is, you know, that salary is pretty impressive for that. My understanding is about $165,000 a year.
Can we talk about statutory responsibilities first? Because
Sure. Yeah.
This is what the elected official is supposed to do. In some cases, they don't fulfill all their statutory duties. And then we can talk about if there's additional duties they do and whether taken over by the manager.
You want to go by position?
I think so.
Okay, we want to start with the trustees, or do we start with the supervisor?
Start with the supervisor.
Okay. Who wants to start?
I don't mind starting. So let's just go through this so we understand. So moderates board and annual meetings. We don't have an annual meeting because we have regularly scheduled meetings. That's for townships, I believe, that are smaller, that only run once a year. So that's roughly 24 meetings a year plus any specials. Chief assessing officer, I don't believe that applies here in Scio. We have a lead assessor. So I don't believe that applies. Secretary to the Board of Review. This is one that Mr. Hathaway does not do this duty. He is not the secretary to the Board of Review.
Is there a secretary?
Well, it's Christie, but he does have a statutory, this has been brought up by a number of residents trying to compel the board to take action on that, and he does not do that. That's not for our, that's not for us to compel. And this is the distinction between the individual and the position. Okay, township's legal agent. So what I believe that means is that if there's any action taken by the township or against the township, then he would be the receiver of the action. If taken against the township, I think if the action taken by the township, I think that person's name is prominent on the filings, we'll say. I don't know that it's anything more than that. I think it's just you have somebody as a named individual.
And they also sign documents for
Right, contracts,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some joint signing responsibility, I think, with treasurer and clerk. Maintain the records of the supervisor's office. We could look and see specifically what that means. I don't know exactly what that means. So for example, if we do a SAD, special assessment district, the supervisor is to draw the roll and submit it to the clerk, something like that. But those are the kind of records I think that would be maintained. This next one, responsible for tax allocation board budget. I don't even know what that is.
And the supervisor has given us regarding that part, saying helps prepare the annual budget under policies formulated by the board, state law.
But this is different. Responsible for tax allocation board budget, if applicable. So I'm gonna say it's not applicable because I've never heard mention of it.
Yeah.
And then we do get into the township budget, and this is where we need to look closely at what the manager does.
I would think everybody's involved in that.
Well, you can have a lot of involvement, but somebody always has to be responsible, so that looks like the supervisor role.
And then appoint some commission members, specifically I know of the planning commission.
All of us. Right?
Nominates.
Nominates, okay.
The next one, may call special meetings. There's also, the trustees can call special meetings with a certain percentage of members and may appoint a deputy. At this point, we don't have a deputy supervisor.
So you're sure in terms of the trustees calling for special meetings, you're sure that's statute?
They may, if they have, I think it's 4 of 7.
Okay,
So it's not exclusive to the supervisor.
good, okay.
So it's another way to get something on the docket if the trustees, when I say trustees, I think that's not the board of trustees, the entire board.
Okay. All right, and then do we want to talk about the duties? Okay. No.
So with the supervisors, their personal job description, the different involvements that we're being told that this person's involved in. And one of the things I wonder, we're not gonna be the people to answer, is how will the new manager take over any of these responsibilities?
Yes, I think so. You definitely, absolutely, yes, because it's in that person's job description. When we start at the top, Mr. Hathaway says he's full-time, and that's not incorrect. That is incorrect.
Well, one of the things I'll say about that is we determined last go around it was a part-time position.
Well, Mr. Hathaway determined it was part-time. If you guys may or may not know, when the board voted to double his salary after this commission was created, I took legal action. I thought that was not appropriate. He voluntarily said that he is in a part-time position as long as there is a manager. So for him to write this in here is not correct. He has acknowledged that there is a standing resolution on that it's a part-time position. So at this moment in time, unless the board would choose otherwise.
I'm just watching this. You guys are fine already.
And because currently the pay is $40,000 per year plus benefits. And whether that individual works 10 hours a week or because they're exempt from any overtime, whether that individual works 10 hours a week or 40 hours a week, it's still going to be $40,000 per year. So it may be.
You might be working 40 hours a week.
Sometimes,
To
yeah.
say, oh, I'm working this amount of time because other people have said, this is how much time I'm putting in or what have you. And I have no idea what he was thinking, but in terms of saying full-time permanent, well, we have permanent till next November.
Right.
We have exempt because he's a salary person. And in terms of full-time, I'll give people the benefit of the doubt, that they're putting in a lot of hours. But to your point, Diane, they haven't been compensated in what we would consider. Does that make sense?
Unless this job is worth $40,000 a year as a full-time position.
Yeah.
So if I look at the rest of the detail in this job description, I would say some of these things are being done voluntarily because they're not directed by the board. So if
This is where it becomes personal. And I don't mean personal in terms of us having being personal, in terms of somebody's making a decision that they want to be involved with this.
well, but it's problematic even if it is voluntary. The township growth, supervised planning and development process, land use master plan, PUD negotiations, facilitate communication between various parties in the development. That is self-assumed responsibility that is not at all directed by the board.
One of the things I thought when we got these, and I actually mentioned this to Christy, is that how somebody views their job and their value and what they're doing. I was an employee and I worked with people who had the same job I did, and we would execute it differently. And while I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but we're being, as with the other people who have provided us job descriptions, this is their perspective of how they are spending their time. I don't think it's for us to say, well, that's a good use of time or it's a bad use of time. We're just saying, what do you do with your time?
No, I think what our job is to evaluate a reward system for the duties that are required. And in this case, these duties were not delegated. And if I put my resident hat on, I take exception to him claiming these responsibilities. We have recent example of Mr. Hathaway working with Dave Luton for Mr. Luton's word, 24 to 36 months on his piece of property on Baker Road, never telling the board anything. And so he thinks he's doing this as a disservice, and I see it as a disservice because that property is now subject to annexation, requested annexation. So I would like to look at all of these categories and say, is this statutory? Is it delegated by the board, or is it something a person is volunteering for and not necessarily in the best interest?
Yeah, and I would argue that's a prudent way to look, not just at supervisor, but the trustee and the treasurer, all of them, yeah. Articulating that, well, I guess the supervisor is most complicated because there's a lot in that discussion, but like you were saying, we're determining the compensation for, the next and whoever and whoever. So it isn't just about the individual descriptions, it's about the position going forward. But I think that would be a good idea to try and separate, what's been given by the board as a duty, what's statutory, and then what's, beyond that. So.
I'm trying to remember when, because I worked on these position descriptions when I worked in the township. And maybe Kathleen, you can remember things. These position descriptions came to the Board of Trustees, came to the entire board. Were they voted upon? Do you remember?
Only the supervisors, but it's been modified
Okay,
since then. So one might say that this is an old description that was voted with the trustees, 3 which have resigned, and it's subsequently been changed by the current board in the past couple of months.
Do we have copies of what they've voted,
We could get
their
that.
resolutions?
Yeah, we could get that.
Can we find those and actually distribute them to the
Yeah.
members of this commission? Thank you.
No, no.
Okay.
I don't think we're making any decisions
You
right
want
now.
resolutions and job descriptions of the board members, correct?
That's what we're talking about, yes.
I think it would be interesting to look at what was voted on by the board and what this is.
Right.
And it would seem that until we can have those in our hands, we're speculating.
Next,
So let's move ahead.
our next, we have some things to put on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yes,
So,
indeed.
what I recall is that there is one for the supervisor. There may be one for the clerk when Clerk Flintoff was appointed in 2019. They had a resolution for that, so that may lead to job description. And I'm not aware of any for trustee or treasurer.
Only the deputy treasurer.
Exactly.
So question, in terms of the trustees, I saw a response from Jillian. Did any other trustees turn in?
Kathy Knoll did recently.
Yeah, Knowles is in the packet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I did see that.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. That's right. Okay, but just those 2. Okay.
So that trustee, it's 4 people holding the same position. So it's not unique to each individual. It's a common position.
Though individuals may have different assigned duties. Okay, as in, when I served on the board, I was assigned by the board to be board liaison to the planning commission.
Right,
Okay, specifically. And other duties like that may be assigned.
right. And that's what we're gonna have to grapple with. Is in our prior meeting, I had done a spreadsheet on how many meetings, how many assignments.
Yeah.
It was astounding, the number of hours commitment.
In some
But
cases,
that's not,
correct.
that's to the position and not to the individual. So some individuals take on more tasks than others.
But there's a difference between a task that an individual takes on voluntarily or as a citizen compared to someone that there's a task that they're assigned specifically to by the Board of Trustees and with specified compensation. Yes. So,
Right,
some
but
trustees go to every, county fair and deal with, the 4-H and so forth. Others choose to do other stuff, so it's voluntary to be there.
Right, and there's currently in Scio Township, they're not compensated
Correct.
additionally for any other assignments.
Okay, where to now?
Well, we talked about the supervisor, so let's move on to the next position of treasurer. So we have the statutory descriptions. And then we also have the treasurer's comments in terms of how they spend their time and the duties they fulfill. Maybe we want to take a look at what those, do we see differences in that? And to your point, as with the supervisor, here's things that are said that are done, maybe not, or maybe, for whatever reason, the structure of our township doesn't allow that. It doesn't require it. And so take a look at the treasurer in terms of the roles and the responsibilities that they have.
But one thing that's, I think is significant is, Treasurer Palmer points out that they have regular scheduled weekly meetings. I wasn't fully aware of that. So they have statutory responsibilities, anything else assigned, which would that be? Do they do a management meeting, I think, once a week?
They may do more than one. We meet with them every Monday.
Right.
It's usually about 2 hours.
That doesn't include trustees.
So it's not a quorum ever.
Oh, yeah.
We meet with the manager.
On that road.
The manager, the supervisor, the clerk, and the treasurer.
Now, this job description states that the treasurer must post a surety bond.
Yes.
Is that being done? Is that,
Yes.
okay? And what, do we specify what amount or how that's, is that compensatable?
No, that bond is essentially a guarantee of a certain level of funds if there was any, what's the right word, untoward actions or malfeasance.
Okay.
And that's in essence an insurance policy.
I
And the
understand.
amount, I'm not sure how the amount is set.
Yeah.
There's recommendations from the Michigan Townships Association of what that amount should be, but I don't know how.
And I don't know about here, but at one of my other clients, the township purchases the bond
Right.
through its insurance agent, which happens to be the same company that we have here.
Okay, and that's also true for the clerk.
And the supervisor.
Generally, I don't have a specific answer on that, but yes, generally, that's the way it works.
Okay.
And it's not mandatory for the supervisor, but I believe Scio does also have a bond. And a bond for the deputy treasurer. Now, if we look at the treasurer, if you look at statutory duties, I believe the statutory duties are greater than the supervisor. There's a lot more effort involved with the township of our size in administrating the taxes, collecting the taxes.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying in terms of the statutory
More
versus.
work that's involved.
Right, if you compared statutory duties of the supervisor to the treasurer to the clerk,
Oh, I see.
the treasurer has more statutory duties than the supervisor. Mandatory things they must do. For the treasurer, these are all mandated. For the supervisor, things like assessing is township dependent derived.
Right, okay.
And then if you look at the clerk, there's duties for record keeping, finance, and then elections, which are a big part of that whole job.
And I can't tell from the description that we got from Treasurer Palmer, I don't see anything, and maybe it's buried somewhere, that there is keeps an account of township receipts, revenues, and expenditures.
She doesn't
So it
call
could be
it,
the deputy treasurer.
they do that, but does she personally do that?
I would think she.
So I think anything in the statutory duties can be assigned to your deputy, for the most part. There's probably something that they can't do. They can't appoint their own deputy to the deputy.
Any other comments regarding the treasurer and their responsibilities?
I actually do have a question. What is mobile home specific tax in the statutory? I've not run across that.
Style farms.
Yeah, so what
That's
is
it
the,
applies to.
You know, that each mobile home is taxed at, I don't know if it's still $30 a year, but it was $30 a year. Because they don't pay real estate property taxes. The mobile home community pays property taxes on the land and the improvements, and then each mobile home is also taxed, but it's differently.
okay,
It's paid to the treasurer, and then if they have, still do it this way, but like, for example, they build a deck, that's personal property under the statute, it gets assessed to the owner, not to the park.
okay.
Don't ask me more, please.
Yeah. Okay. By the clerk then?
Well, we're going to be getting some information, I believe, from the clerk in terms of her, how she views her responsibilities. We didn't get that in time for this meeting. So I suggested we move on to the trustees because we're letting other people have personal input to their job descriptions. And so I don't think we should, I think we've got enough time here. There's no reason not to take her personal information as well.
Okay.
So with that, we have two, both Ms. Berry and Ms. Knoll have given us information. So I suggest we jump to that and look at their descriptions and perspectives of what they do. Versus their statutory. I think the statutory, I mean, obviously for everyone, it was kind of chop. You know, in terms of, here's some of the basic things and that how they're expanded upon is, everybody's expanding on a little different with different responsibilities, perhaps from assignments as well as from levels of interest in particular things that they're involved with in the township. So this gives us some perspectives.
So there's three things: township legislatures, responsible for the township's fiduciary health and other duties. So when other duties as assigned by the board. So Jim, you said you were assigned to be
Planning Commission.
the planning commission. So when somebody takes on the role like Trustee Knoll, was she assigned to Gelman to work on that?
So maybe she volunteered. To say this is my level of interest.
I'm not sure if that was a board assignment or not.
I don't know what other responsibilities that trustees take on, which are assigned, except for the planning commission.
So we would like, is it fair to say that we would like more information on each of the trustees to know what their assignments currently are?
Yeah, that'd be worthwhile. Assignments from the board.
Wouldn't that be in the minutes of the board? If there's a vote to assign someone?
It certainly should be, but it'd be interesting to compare that with the view that the actual trustees have.
And some of these, again, may be compensated by outside bodies. There's a county planning commission that I think pays a per diem from the county as opposed to, and so we need to look at that as well.
And I think like when you're on the planning commission, where you paid, you get me, so certain things where you're assigned to it, you're getting, compensated for
At
something.
that time, that's the way that worked, yes.
Per meeting, is that?
Yes.
I wonder if we're still doing it for planning.
Jillian might have mentioned that in hers.
And there is not for any other committee, do they get paid?
I wonder if that might fit through as well for the ZBA. So it feels.
So when you look at the statutory responsibilities, you have to read into what does that mean? So township legislator required to vote on all issues. So what that means to me is you need to read everything in the packet to be able to make determinations, which leads to the township's fiduciary health. So they're voting on anything that involves expending money, but the heavy lifting to me is being reading all that material. I do it and I don't even get paid for it.
You get $7,500 a year.
No, I'm not a trustee. I mean, I read it all because
She's a citizen and a
You're
commissioner.
That's right.
because I'm interested.
I think you may be the only person in the whole township who does it without,
No, there's a few of
It's
us.
tedious.
There's a few of us. And that's why I can talk about recent.
Absolutely, yes. And that's a lot of the things that trustee Carey describes in those pages, or that page is exactly that, reviewing the documents for the meetings and becoming educated to make appropriate decisions.
Actually, there's stuff that isn't said in here. I know that some of the trustees work directly with citizens. They'll ask them questions, they'll ask for assistance.
Yeah, I think trustee Carey mentions that, visiting residents' homes, neighborhoods to investigate their issues.
Those are, when you're a public, when you run for office, you're a public person. Jim, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, that hasn't changed. So you have to prepare for meetings, understand what it is you're going to be involved with, and be able to respond to people, to us, to the citizens. That comes with the territory of the positions. I would think that's something that applies to everybody in an elected position.
I would agree.
The one thing I'm interested in for the trustees, actually all the positions, is we had just a little bit of historical knowledge about trustees that prior to 2018, the rate was something like $5,900. Well, what was it? How long was that value in place? And from 2018 to, we just bumped it up from 7,000 to 7,500. I advocated at the last session that there should be a sense of cost of living, inflationary for all of these positions. So, and then comparison to what other like townships are doing. So that would be interesting, actually, for the treasurer as well, because their current level is probably most people would consider it low for the amount of the responsibility,
There obviously is some record on that to get the history of, let's say, the
It doesn't have to
salaries for these positions going back to, let's say, 2012, go back 10 years.
Sure,
be, yeah.
I'll get that for you.
Thank you.
And the cost of living increases, and I was going to look I know the University of Michigan, they have right now, they're going through their salary programs. And all the departments and schools and colleges will be giving, their increase will be between 3% and 4% for fully performing individuals. And that takes into account the cost of living, particularly in Washtenaw County, which is one of the most expensive areas to live in. And second in the state of Michigan right now. Second most expensive. I think the other one is up in Leelanau.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I looked up something in terms of cost of living earlier today, just because I thought, the world has changed a bit. I mean, it's kind of, on autopilot for quite a time there, and obviously it is not today. And at the beginning of this year, the average pay raise or the federal employees that they were looking at increases with cost of living of being 4.1%. And, just as a point of reference to say.
But that's an annual number, right? So
It's annual number for 2023. That's what I looked up. And I think one of the things where, to your point, is we're meeting every other year, or this commission meets every other year. And those, we're probably, we're looking at this as a bigger picture here, because when these salaries go into effect in 2024, they're going to be in effect from 2024 to 2026. Or to the 2025.
Would it be
Sorry.
practical to include some reference to annual base inflation rates? I know that Social Security, we got something like 7.9% from 2022. We could look at what was the rates in 2021, 2022, and then also include a recommendation that similar increments could be included in changes through 2024.
And Trustee Carey, she provided information, had called and done some legwork in terms of calling some other townships to get some insight. One of the things where we've been provided the Michigan Township Salary Report, but my understanding, first of all, not everybody participates. You may have to pay to participate, and there's legwork that's involved in that, so there's how much you're gonna get out of it. It's difficult, and when we were here a year and a half ago, I think it's difficult to make an apples to apples comparison based upon population, based upon urban versus rural and all those sorts of things. And it's, we try to sift through those things.
it can be done.
Anything can be done.
Well,
It's, it takes some.
Well, I did some of this effort the last go around. You can find comparable general law townships with comparable population in taxable values. I can cite two. Grosse Ile is a general law township. Comparable, they have a completely different staffing model, that they're very professional staff heavy, not heavy, but their staffing does most of the efforts, and their elected officials do minimal. And then there's Spring Lake Township, which is on the west side of the state. They're comparable in terms of population and taxable value. So we can start to do that, but you have to apply logic to it. So you look at the salaries for the clerk and the supervisor and treasurer in Grosse Ile, it's just rock bottom, because
They're paying people to do the work.
exactly.
Well, and there's also too, we now have $165,000 manager. So we've got somebody that's gonna be doing a little bit more work than somebody who's been available for the last, 16 months. So it's, there's a little finessing in terms of doing that. But as I said, trustee Carrie, she certainly did some legwork to, give us some information, which I think is valuable. It's just another, more information, to help us get our head around it. As I said, I think with the clerk, we'll wait for that information and have that conversation next time. If people are good with the conversations up to this point, with the supervisor, the treasurer, and the trustee, that for our agenda, we're going to benefits and personnel handbook.
Actually, is there anything on trustee Knowles?
That was any different?
Yeah, that we should,
just that, in terms of the job description, I didn't know that there was something in particular that jumped out to talk more about. I think this kind of highlights the difference of how people spend their time more than anything else. That's how I interpreted it. But please, whatever you think.
But Trustee Dahl does a lot of, she goes above and beyond. She and John Reiser are working on a policy document for use of our various attorneys. And Mark Brazo did a lot of work on our efforts for 300 North Zeeb and that Brownstone TIF agreement. So you have to take a lot of it. We don't have John Reiser's yet, but he's on LBA, he's on planning. He attends a lot of these other meetings.
Well, let me ask you, would it be helpful to get the other trustees' comments as well for conversation for next time? Or does that give us more insight, or is it just people have a lot of responsibilities? And because to me, this looks at, just people, what they're doing is different.
Right, and we have to come up with
do we need to come up with one
standard.
number? Do we need the other people's descriptions? Would that help us?
I think it would help, but at the same time, based on the activity levels that I already see for trustee Carrie and I don't want to put any more responsibility on them.
I'm assuming they're busy.
Yeah, they seem pretty busy for the current level of compensation anyway. But I definitely think it'd be helpful to see their personal, descriptions.
So we're going to do some more research. I wouldn't mind taking assignments to do research. I don't think Chrissy has to do everything, which I was going to do anyway. I go and look at what other townships are doing, but I don't mind taking assignments for past 10 years of COLA adjustments, inflation rates, stuff like that. And I'll bring that for the next meeting.
For the past 10 years with the salaries, so we can compare the salaries to them. I don't think we need to compare this.
No, that's what you suggested, 10 years. I think that's great.
Yeah,
I almost feel like trustees, this is my personal opinion, so it's, they need a little catch up from having been not rewarded.
Well, that's what we're here to decide. Give us, get the information so that we can have a solid base for recommendation.
Statistics, pick that stuff up.
Right, exactly. Because that's how I would make determinations.
Well, that gives us one measure. Okay.
It's a tool.
Yep.
Okay, so first of all, are we done with that part of it for the moment?
I think so.
So moving on to the benefits and personnel handbook. And we'd like to start with comments on it. Or- As I mentioned earlier, my background is retirement plans, so, I'm always kind of sensitive to those things. And that as the township, in terms of that additional compensation that people are receiving, an 8% retirement contribution, 8% of their salary. As of April 1st, they get $1,250 in health savings account. They don't pay anything for the health insurance, other than I think they have $1,000 a year deductible and 20% copay. I would, that's pretty generous. Health insurance is a big deal. And I would think that if you, did a survey upon the citizens of our township, most people do not have free health insurance. And so we're only responsible to talk about the salaries. But I think in terms of looking at the full picture, that is not something that should be ignored.
Right.
So I'm gonna put that out there as just something to think about.
Typically, the meme is that government employment and full-time work for government, county, state, whatever, the salaries tend to be lower than the private sector, but the benefits tend to be stronger. More paid vacation, more sick time, better health insurance policies, and so on and so forth. Typically, my typical experiences with Washtenaw County, where Washtenaw County had charged employees for their health insurance and had substantial copays. This insurance package looks a little better.
Well, that's a wonderful package.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
you have
very
health
nice.
insurance, first of all, and I don't begrudge anybody that.
It's a suitable benefit and good compensation for a full-time employee.
To our citizens.
Right.
And so I'm sensitive about, I want everybody, I don't want people questioning us. I would prefer, I just want to make sure that we're looking at it from all angles, in terms of that whole picture of what it is. Because I would think a lot of people would say, well, I don't get, free health insurance. And as health insurance becomes more and more expensive, it's just more of a front page item. So, and that's my opinion.
Yeah,
So
no, I
that's
think
what
it's
we're here to talk about.
Very valid viewpoint.
And in our case, supervisor, treasurer, or clerk are eligible for this package, but trustees are not.
Correct.
Trustees may receive some
They get 8% on the
Yeah.
retirement.
fixed contribution.
Now, because right now the supervisor position is not a full-time position. There's a supervisor, and in the handbook it says, I think it was.
I think it's part-time in.
I was trying to think, because I remember when I was hiring somebody, they were made at 50%, they did not get any benefits. That was for a staff member.
No, the supervisor does get benefits.
Yes, okay. Yeah, the 3 officers do not record vacation.
The 4 trustees don't get the health.
Yeah, and the officers don't record vacation, so they don't accumulate vacation time. They're eligible for some things like the Family Medical Leave Act.
Any other comments on that? I think we've discussed the statutory duties. I don't know if there's anything more to say today about those particular. As we look to continue our conversations on the 16th, is there any additional information that we should be looking at or requesting?
position description of the clerk. What was the position description that was approved by the board for the supervisor?
That's reasonable.
And any other officer.
So we're looking at just to kind of, so the descriptions for the clerk and the other two trustees in terms of what they're doing. The assigned task and responsibilities to the trustees, the previous income levels for 10 years, the cost of living for the last 10 years, and the approved job descriptions by the board for each of the positions. Did I miss anything?
But do you have the delegated responsibilities there from the Board of Trustees?
You mean the assigned ones?
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, those are the assigned tasks.
Okay.
So, delegated.
Yeah, I'm sorry, use the wrong term.
So new business, this brings us to new business in terms of discussion of time demands on trustees, clerk, supervisor, and treasurer. I think we kind of covered that a little bit, but maybe there's more to talk about. Tough thing with time. Everybody gets that 24 hours. Nobody gets an extra minute. And you know, and how we use it, I think time's very valuable.
That's what life is made of. Yeah, I don't have anything on.
I think that as we gather more information, that we might be able to come back to that and have a, expand our conversation on that. Well, that's been kind of the big part of today, really, obviously, that's what we're here for. We've got a couple things to do. One of them is, first of all, I want to personally thank Kirsty for being so accessible and organized and making all of our lives a lot easier. So I want to make sure, public record, we acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Possible election of officers. I was elected as a chairperson last time. That doesn't mean I'm not Queen Elizabeth. I don't have a lifetime appointment here.
It's good because she's no longer with us.
She's on the better side of things.
Careful what you say.
So you want to be Charles III.
So if we want to elect a new chairperson or for this time period, this would be a time in which we would do it.
I'd love for you to stay.
Thank you.
Support.
I wouldn't, I would do chair if you guys would wanted a different somebody else.
Well, I'm willing to take it on, so, we can have a vote. I don't know if we want to vote for one or the other, or how many people for Kathleen, how many people for me. I don't know how to do that, Jim.
Yeah, okay.
The normal procedure would be a motion and you could take Commissioner Boyd's comment as a motion. I heard Commissioner Dries second it. Or you could ask for a motion. Somebody makes a motion, you vote on that one and then do the next one.
So we sort of have a motion that's out there already and seconded.
So in the union meetings, there's a motion to close nominations and cast a unanimous ballot. Is that ever appropriate here?
Not in a public body, subject to the open
Yeah.
meetings act, but
Never.
So, Kathleen, you want to do a vice chair? I don't want to be a vice chair this year. If you'd want to be a vice chair.
I don't know if we need a vice chair. Right, we only meet for less than 45 days every other year.
Well, how about this? If I'm elected to continue this position, Kathleen only lives a couple blocks away from me. And I'm big into communication in terms of, I get hit by that proverbial truck that I keep Kathleen in the loop for everything. We work together. And if I get that truck, it's yours. How's that sound? Is that reasonable? I mean, we only have a few meetings, but I'm more than willing, and I'm gonna be done here at the end of this term. So,
You're getting reappointed.
oh. So what about, Kathleen, what do you think about that?
It's fine.
Okay, with that, all in favor of voting for me to be the chairperson for this session of 2023?
Aye.
Okay, I didn't hear any opposals, and so that takes care of that. This is an adjournment. Now, it seems like we should have the public comment before
Yes,
adjournment.
and I apologize, I didn't catch that on your agenda until just now. You should not adjourn until you have public
Yeah, I
comment.
think should we have public comment first? So with that, we're all zoomed in here, and my understanding is people can have up to 3 minutes on any subject. We have timers. We want to hear everything you have to say.
Actually, the time is derived by the committee itself, so.
It's under our purview.
Exactly.
I would say 3 minutes is a fine amount of time.
Let's go ahead, if somebody talks longer, let's have the grace of civility.
Oh,
to
yes.
allow them.
Yeah.
But it has to be on the matter under our purview.
You have to open for
Well, by
public
the-
comment, Jim.
Can't talk about Martians or UFOs.
You should open
You
it for
cannot
comment,
restrict what
yes.
people can talk about based on the OMA.
Wait, she has opened it for,
She did, okay, good.
they didn't amend the agenda, but
Okay, the first person for public comment is Pam Boyd, followed by Rob Pattinson.
Hello, Pam.
Thank you. Thank you, Chrissy. Pam Boyd, a Scio resident, Scio community newsletter. Scio Township has grown over the last 2 decades and is at the top of its general law designation in terms of residents and income. Unfortunately, they have not added the staff to keep up with our growth. If you compare other townships, many who are charter townships, you will see that the healthy functioning townships, general law or charter, many have in-house staff such as a finance director, and adequate staff, in-house planning department, as well as other support staff. Scio Township severely lacks adequate support staff. Trustees in those better run townships receive a similar compensation to ours with more perks than what our trustees receive. However, it should be noted that because our trustees don't have the staff to bring them information to make sound judgments, it's a problem. Instead, our trustees have to spend time researching the issues themselves if they want to choose to go deeper beyond the model motion put forth by the supervisor. This in turn creates a township board that chases after problems. And please don't say that because we have a master plan, we follow the master plan, because a plan is not always followed by members of our board. I appreciate your efforts in this compensation commission. The biggest problem I see with most committees and boards is that they don't do enough education and research before they make a decision. I would ask that this commission speak to other townships to find out what staff they have to support each of the positions of supervisor, clerk, treasurer, and trustees. Also ask the question why we have had now, as of June 5th, 4 managers/administrators in the last 12 months. That's a big problem in our township. Until you have done a deep dive such as Kathleen Brandt, you may not have all the information to make good decisions. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Pam.
for your comments.
Rob Pattinson, go ahead. Thank you.
you start.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have anybody else?
I see no other hands raised.
Well, thank you to all the
Hold
people
on.
that have.
Hold on.
Sorry, Jonathan, go ahead, please.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I want to agree with the past two speakers and points they made. It was also nice to see the focus today and the research done. Kathleen, well done. Glad to have you on this commission. I think when you talk about people getting free health care, I think we need to be careful on how that sounds, especially coming from people of means. I mean, maybe I'm just too egalitarian and believe that healthcare is a right in this country, but the way that it was talked about with derision and a negativity, well, they get free healthcare. Most people don't get free healthcare. Look, folks are working, most of the folks working there very hard for a lower salary than they could probably otherwise get elsewhere. I really think that the problems with the staffing levels and the amount of work, I just don't think we should be discussing benefits in that tone. It's not seemly. Thank you. Oh, and Jim Fink, welcome. Nice to see you here.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Jonathan. Anybody else? I see no other hands raised.
To all of you that have zoomed in, thanks for your interest. We like when people are participating. With that, I move that we adjourn this meeting. And all in favor, or anybody second?
A second.
All in favor?
All right.
And we'll be back here on Friday, the 16th at 1 o'clock.
Good.